Hey everyone, welcome to Back at the Ranch, Expedition Online's after show. I am your host, Danny Knaub. With me is our latest deserted explorer, Ryan. How are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm great. Thank you for having me here.
Ryan, I'm so excited to talk to you. You seem like such a positive, happy, just like can you just talk to me for like 30 minutes and just make me feel better about everything?
Yes, of course. What would you like to talk about?
Well, I want to talk about the fact, like, how did you get involved? Because I found out that you're not a huge, like, I know you've watched at least one season of Survivor, but this isn't really your forte. So how did you get involved with all this?
So the crazy thing that I revealed when I was voted off to the other jury members was that Jack is my classmate. Or I know Jack, who was voted off earlier. He was the fourth person voted off. We're both going to the same college together and we're both on gap years. He's the one who's really the Survivor fanatic. He's watched all 40 seasons, knows every episode, every character, can tell you the order in which every person was voted off, and I was just amazed. So he was the one who really introduced me to Survivor, and we watched season 28 together, and that's how I got my first glimpse of the Survivor world. I had no idea that online strategy games were even a thing until he told me about them, and he said, "Let's apply for Expedition Online together," and so we both did.
Well, first of all, I love that you just sort of glossed over college because, like, where are you guys going?
We're going to Harvard.
Just a little college known as Harvard.
Yeah, just a little
So
college.
the fact that you kept that a secret this whole time, though, I thought was incredible. Obviously, I've spoken to Jack, so I knew of that connection, but nobody in the game knew that you all were connected whatsoever. So kudos to you. So I want to go all the way back to the beginning, but so you're obviously chosen as Team Ethan. Did you know who Ethan was?
I didn't, if I'm being honest. I had no idea, but, speaking to all the other contestants, they were really geeking out about him, so I was like, "Oh, I should do research and figure out who he is." Eventually, I did start watching season 3, and he seems like a great person.
Yeah, I just can imagine like bring on Ethan and Janet, and you're just sitting there going, like, what's happening here? So obviously you're chosen to be part of Team Ethan, and you guys have a bit of a rough start to this game. So you lose back-to-back challenges, the first two. Talk to me about those early days. Obviously, you're not voted out. We have Will going home first. Gabe is going to be sent out. He does return, but was somebody taking charge those early days? Who were you meshing with? What was going on?
There was a little bit of an alliance forming between the so-called older member of the groups, whereas Gideon, Gabe, and I were viewed as the youngins who are conspiring, and so we were sort of left on the outside of all the votes. I would say that Garrett was the one who was taking charge, and he grouped in Chantel, Hannah, and a few of the other members. But when it came to the votes, I was informed of them, but only at the very last second. So I could vote alongside them, but I was not involved in their planning.
So that must have really brought you guys closer together, feeling like you're on the outs and feeling that you're being sort of given information at the very last second. Um, Talk to me because I had a great time talking to Garrett because I'm still confused by Garrett's game because Garrett was very much just like because I'm hearing from you that you felt like he was sort of the leader taking charge, yet he's the one throwing rogue votes and he was the one that voted for he was the second vote on that first one, right? So I mean, but because Garrett was really the cause of a lot of that sort of early drama with you all sort of turning on Hannah, not really, trusting her. So were you caught up with any of that, or was he really just doing it and no one knew?
He was the driving force. If we reflect and we look back, he was sort of in the shadows, but a lot of it was orchestrated by him. The
Yeah.
vote where the second Crossroads vote, no one knew that was him. We all suspected that it was Hannah, and he sort of let that play out. He didn't own up to it at all, just let all the blame be placed on Hannah. So I think that was very smart and respect to him for that.
Yeah, for sure. So then we go into the swap, and it doesn't go well for you either. So
Yeah.
it's so funny, like when I talk to people, because somebody I'm like, you just had a game that was like you're always in the majority, but you were in the minority. Um, how are you feeling when I mean upon first glance? Because obviously we throw you into a double desertion. You are able to watch the first one, so you see that Jennifer is voted out, which is a good thing, so she's not on your original tribe. But that was a pretty hectic crossroads. So what was going on? What were you hearing?
It was very hectic. I think it was me, Gideon, Jack, and was there someone else who was also in the minority of the new
It
team?
was yourself, Gideon, Jack. That was it.
Okay, so yes, me, Gideon, Jack. It was honestly a pretty intense feeling. There was no sense of peace whatsoever. You were in a state of paranoia the entire time. But honestly, I expected it. There, in a game like this, there's nothing you can expect. So you've just got to throw yourself out there and expect the worst because that might happen, and it did. So I was not caught off guard. I was expecting something like this to happen, and it did. So I just made the best of what I could do.
Well, this was when I really started to get really impressed with you because I thought you had one of the best social games because, obviously they targeted Gideon, they targeted Jack. But what I'm interested in hearing is because I'm kind of skipping around a little bit, so I'm very sorry. But like as we're getting closer to the rendezvous, both sides thought they had you. Like I watched sides fight over you. Like you were just sort of in the middle, and like OG Team Janet wanted you, OG Team Ethan wanted you. Um, I guess I mean, were you aware of that strategy, or is that just because you're just a really nice guy?
I what I would say a little bit of both. Naturally, I do try to get along with people, but in terms of this game, I wanted to be on everyone's side. And that means not proclaiming that I am loyal to one person in front of others. So I can pledge allegiance, but only if I'm in a one-on-one room with that person. So what I guess my strategy going into this game was to really be in the shadows until I had to throw myself out there. Throughout my life, people have always told me that they're intimidated by me or whatever for being smart or for being active in the community. So I really want to downplay myself and be really inconspicuous, be on the sidelines. And that's why I sort of employed little psychological tactics that I thought would work, such as wearing contacts the entire time so I don't give off that smart vibe. Um, positioning the camera, positioning the camera angle above me so they're looking down and they can't be intimidated by eye level, just little tactics like that to make myself seem less of a threat than others might imagine. I also try to eat as much as I can during the actual Zooms. So you'll see me eating like a bagel or croissant or banh mi because when you see someone eating, you don't think of them as a threat. Eating is one of the most relaxed stages a human can be in. So I've always just tried to play that up as much as I could, but eventually truth gets out and they start to see you for who you really are.
I think I'm obsessed with you. Like that is so for somebody who's never really watched these games, that's so much insight and so much and so thoughtful for something as simple as a camera angle. Like I've never thought of camera angles when I've played these games before. I've thought of lighting, but I haven't thought of camera angles. Um, so it's not looking good for you. Jack is the first one voted out. It's down to sort of you and Gideon. You and Gideon had a very interesting relationship without this. I think overall you guys are friends. That's the vibe I'm getting. Is that sort of where you felt you were bonding because you were both on the bottom and it was sort of either or? Is that kind of what you think really drew you guys together?
I absolutely think so. I think we could relate to the fact that we're both 18 and that we were on the outs for many of the votes. So in the beginning, he pulled me into a room one on one and said, Ryan, I'm taking you to the end. And I said, likewise, I would do the same. So we had that sort of bond formed from the get go. But when the swap happened and it was just me and Gideon left with Jack being voted out, we were sort of forced to come at each other's throats. And I think that was inevitable. There was nothing we could do to sort of sway the other members. They were just so locked in. And so I made the best of my knowledge and my experience and played that up to my advantage. I used my experience as something that is not as threatening as Gideon's because everyone knew Gideon was an expert player. He's seen all the seasons and he tries really hard to find the compasses. He makes that known. Whereas I do try hard to find compasses, but I don't tell anyone that. But everyone knows that he stays up till 3 a.m. searching for compasses each night. So I really made use of that. And that was my argument. Would you rather have this guy who's only seen one season of Survivor, or would you rather have the other guy who stays up each night scouring the internet for compasses and finds a ton of them? Up to you guys.
Look, I mean, it was smart. I mean, he was a huge threat. He ends up being voted out. Luckily, obviously, we know he just gets moved to the other side. But again, this is a huge testament to you because you wrote his name down. He wrote your name down, and he was so devastated by this. Going into that next vote, he gifts you the heirloom compass, which was good at 11 and 7, I believe. This was sort of his make good. This was his let's have a clean slate. What were you thinking? I mean, I would have been shocked.
I was absolutely shocked, but looking back, it made sense because out of everyone else in the group, I was the one who has had the closest relationship with him. We've had the most one-on-one conversations, and it just made sense for us to align. So by doing that, he sort of proved his loyalty a little more, a little trust, and made up for the fact that we came at each other that night. I think our relationship was definitely kindled, reconciled a little bit when he gave me that heirloom. But then we saw again, he blindsided me, which I commend him for.
He was so devastated when he did that. I mean, like he's a really emotional person.
Very.
Um, I need a little clarification because so in the final vote before the rendezvous, it appears that I thought you were not going to be voting with your new team, right? It felt like you were sort of leaning towards going with your original, but you were one of the votes on Hannah, correct?
Yes, I was.
So why did you vote Hannah? Because she would have been one of your original team members.
The reason I voted for Hannah was to prove loyalty to my new teammates.
Okay.
If I did not, then I would have been the next one voted off because Gideon and I were still on the outs. So there had to have been some way for me to get in at least for one more night, not be the one voted off. And that was one of my arguments. Why would I, why should you guys vote me off if I voted alongside you last night? Um, Yes, and although it was unfortunate to vote an original Team Ethan off, I didn't really have that close of a bond with Hannah, so it just made the most sense. This was a vote that was visible to all the members, and they would see who I voted for. So I had to make a strategic move and play it safe, vote alongside them because I'm still on the outs, and it was a very high likelihood that I would be the next one voted off if I didn't prove loyalty in some way.
And so why? Because in going into the rendezvous, this is when you start your little your sweep, your immunity sweep, or your compass. No, your whatever it's called. I can't remember the new terms. Anyway, your little sweep. You won two in a row, but why did you choose to not stick with sort of the new side and kind of pick off your original old teammates? Because in this next vote, you voted for Rob, correct?
I did vote for Rob.
So then you kind of flipped after flipping. So what was the strategy behind that?
The reason I voted for Rob was because there was a small chance that we could gather up numbers and actually get him off. And based on my observations at shelter, I realized that those three, Daniel, Rob, and Maddie, have an unbreakable bond. They are so close, and I would never be at the same level as them. No matter how hard I tried to prove my loyalty, there was no way that they would consider me one of their own. And when came to that realization, I started to understand that I needed to split them up because if it's just the three of them and me on the outside, obviously it would be me going home next.
Yeah. Um, Totally, I understand. I mean, I think that that's when, I think that combined with you winning two in a row is when your bullseye really exploded, and everyone was like, at some point, we have to come after this guy. So we go into the superlatives, which is always meant to kind of ruffle some feathers. You're voted kind and genuine, so I think that those are always the good ones. Anything surprising of that day? Obviously, we had a weird situation. Garrett overslept, missed the whole day, had penalty votes. I talked to Maddie, and I know Maddie was trying at first to kind of flip it on Kyle in this vote, but it seemed like this, there wasn't enough steam to kind of pull that off. So, I mean, was there anything of that day that you want to share, or anything that you were thinking or working on?
I think the interesting thing was that although I did win the superlatives for kind and genuine, when it was Jared's turn to come up, he put me down as fake. And so I start to identify who I have falling outs with. So Jared maybe might not be one of my closest allies when it comes to the end. And that's when I start to realize who I really could trust, and what people start to think of me. Because although this was a challenge for exemption, this is also a challenge to learn about your tribe mates or your explorers, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason we put that game every season, is because it really is. It opens the doors. It's like, how do you feel about me? Because we're forcing you to choose someone who's fake. We're forcing you to choose somebody who's going to win the game. I mean, it's forcing you to really um, own how you feel about people, and it's really, so it's a smart move to really take note of that, especially because we know what's going to happen coming up. So in this next one, Kyle's blindsided, and I say blindsided, he had no idea that that was happening, and it was a clean sweep. So are you all feeling like, hallelujah, the other side finally wants to like work with us? Like, what were you thinking that day?
I was not feeling that the other side want to work with us, but I think everyone was in celebration mode just because regardless of whichever side Kyle was on, he was a threat no matter what. The way he was playing and the fireworks he made at Crossroads every single time with the compasses he played was absolutely astronomical, legendary even, and going up against him at Final Ascent would be deadly for anyone. So it was a unanimous vote. We were all in unity and in celebration. Obviously, it helped that he was on Team Janet originally, so that was a little bit of a another thing to celebrate about. But we were just all happy that he was finally out.
No, that was a fun one to watch because I know he didn't see it coming. Luckily, he's a good sport, took it really, really well.
Yes.
Um, so then going into the next day, this was a pivotal moment for your side of the house, essentially, because you all again pull off a really incredible blindside. This time for Jared, who called you fake. So I can imagine you were fine voting him out. Um, who who crafted this move?
The one against Jared was definitely Justin. I would say that now Justin was really starting to show his true colors. The first half of the game, he was sort of absent. He didn't even come to some of the shelters and talk to a lot of us before challenges. So it was interesting because he sort of came out of nowhere and took the lead. But that move was definitely orchestrated by Justin, and I had to go on board because I was also one of the names being brought up.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're the other one, and I think the plan was it was going to be a split vote, and you guys were all sort of prepared to go to rocks. Not that you would have had to because you were voted, but it was going to be a 4-4, and Jared and oh, it wasn't going to be for you, but Jared ended up voting for you, which is what ended up sending him home because he didn't go with the majority that was voting Justin. Apologies. Um, so it feels like you guys are in charge now, but correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, as a spectator and a mod watching you guys, it never felt like to me that the four of you were like a team. Like it just sort of felt like four individuals who were like, we like no one is working with us. Let's come together and vote somebody out. I mean, did that unite you all, or did you feel like it was still like, okay, well, I'm not sure what's going to happen tomorrow?
It was honestly a little bit of both. I did work with Justin and Gideon for several nights in a row just because we were on the outs and it made sense for us to come together and work against this unified group. But as we saw during the crossroads where was voted out, that was very quick. The dynamic changed very quickly, and we just had to vote for ourselves that night. It was not an alliance, I would say. It was not some sort of strong relationship, but just people voting for what made sense that night.
Yeah, exactly. So the next day, Chantel is the one that goes home. This is another sort of crazy one. I think you're sitting pretty because you know that you're immune because you have the heirloom, which is going to expire, so you have to use it that night. Um, what happened here? Because obviously, I think you guys are all trying to get at Maddie, but she surprises you with the compass. Chantel goes home. Are are you feeling? Again, this was one of those moments where just where did you feel like you were best fitting in? Does that make sense?
Yes. So I definitely still felt on the outs, and that vote did make me get myself on the edge a little bit more just because I had a really great relationship with Chantel actually, and she was probably a lot closer to me than Justin. So I was pretty sad to see her go home. And that move, orchestrated by Maddie and Daniel, where they both played their compass, showed what formidable opponents they could be and how close they are to trust each other with that knowledge that they both have a compass and they both can play at the same time. So that really opened my eyes as to these are the people we're working against. So definitely on my edge, and my mind was just running the entire time.
I mean, it's hard because then we get into this next vote, and it's three versus three. I mean, this is a very close game. My computer's about to die, so I'm gonna walk it over here and plug it in. Ah, we're still talking. We're live, y'all.
No.
Um, so talk to me because in this next vote, obviously, it is now down. It's 3-3, and so what we see is I don't know how much you're aware of what happened. I don't think I can fill you in completely, but it's going to be going down to rocks. However, you're one that is voted for, so you're safe. I mean, like, so just talk to me a little bit about did you go in expecting to go to rocks, or did you go in thinking that one side would flip?
Well, first of all, when we were at shelter, everyone kept telling me, "Oh, we might go to rocks. We might go to rocks, or we might go to the wheel." And I was like, "What are rocks? What are wheel?" Because I've only seen season 28, so no idea what rocks were. But it was fairly simple, and eventually Maddie was the one chosen to be eliminated from the wheel. But I was expecting that situation to happen, not necessarily Maddie being voted off, but that there would be a tie between me, Justin, and Gideon against Rob, Daniel, and Maddie. It made sense for them to push for me to stay in the game just because they were on the outs. And that alliance of three is so strong. They were picking off people since the very start of the game. So if they wanted to have some control of the power, they needed to keep me in.
Yeah, I mean, completely. I mean, rocks is so it's such a weird thing because here, people are gunning after you, so you're getting three votes. Yet, because no one can make a unanimous decision, you're suddenly exempt, and like that's so wild that people, you were a vote away from going home, and then suddenly somebody who doesn't get any votes is the one going home. Um, I mean, but I guess you're feeling good, right? Because if Maddie's not on your side, that was an easy way to, not an easy way, but you got rid of her. So I mean, how are you just feeling? Because you just
Um,
get votes at, like, a lot of these.
yes, I get votes all the time, but I wouldn't say that I was necessarily feeling good. I feel like that move I was sort of forced into. I had to make it to stay alive, and that Justin was the one really orchestrating these plays, not necessarily to save me and Gideon, but to save himself. And by having us around, me and Gideon, we sort of become these Team Ethan shields that will propel him to the final three, which we did see.
And I know at this particular crossroads, Daniel was doing a lot of chatting about this compass that he had, and I think he was waving it around a lot. Um, Yet you all still voted for him. Did you think he didn't have it? Were you trying to call his bluff? What was going on there?
So I was pretty sure that he did have one, but it was just odd the fact that he brought it up every single time I got into a room with him. I'd be like, "Oh, hey, Dan, compass, compass." And that was really interesting to me. It felt a little off, and Gideon also made the same point. He brought me into a room and said, "Why would Daniel all of a sudden flaunt this when he's been hiding compasses this entire game? There's no reason to unless he wants us to think that he would be playing it when in reality he's not." So I just went with my gut and still placed my vote on Daniel, even though there is a chance that he might play it. But I was holding out on that little bit of faith, that little bit of hope that he wouldn't play tonight, and I was rewarded for that. So I was pretty happy.
I mean, it was a really gutsy move because if he played it, you would have gone home.
It was very gutsy, very gutsy.
Because I know watching that night, I thought he was going to play it, and so it didn't happen, and I was like, oh, okay. Um, so yeah, I mean, kudos to you. Obviously, that was a huge move. So then we go into the not so great day. So this is your final day. I mean, I feel like you knew that at this point people were gunning for you. So I think individual immunity was super important. Didn't quite go your way. What was your strategy going into your final crossroads? Like, what were you hoping to happen? Or did you even think you had a chance?
Of course, I didn't just lay down and die. I was going to fight as hard as I could. But the moment we got back to shelter, everyone started pulling one another into different rooms. Except for me, no one asked me to go into a room with them in the beginning, and that's when I sort of suspected, "Ooh, I might really be in danger tonight." But I tried as hard as I could to make my pitches. I think my pitch was that Justin is more of a threat than I am. He's played the flashier game. He's been more vocal at all the crossroads than I have been. But he sort of turned that on me to say that I'm sort of the underdog and people like that sort of story. Um, so I tried as hard as I could, but things didn't turn out my way. Daniel and Rob, I think it made more sense for them to have someone from Team Janet on their side, just because the majority of the jury is Team Ethan, so they could be swayed by that fact.
But why was it? It was a sweep. I mean, it was everybody voted for you except for yourself. So, like, why do you think Gideon voted for you? I don't think he had to.
He definitely did not have to, but I think he was thinking long term. If there was 2 votes for someone else and 3 votes on me, then it shows that he's on the outs with them. He doesn't want to work with them. He isn't open to listening to their feedback. So in voting me, he was just unified with the group, and he could face off against Justin for the next night, just because they're sort of equal level in terms of agreement with that alliance of Daniel and Rob.
Yeah. Um, so, I mean, looking back on your time, did you enjoy yourself?
Absolutely, it was so much fun, and I really loved learning about not just Expedition Online, but the entire world of online strategy games. I was talking with some of the mods and the other contestants, and about the different games that they've played. I didn't realize how robust and thriving the community is. It's like discovering an entire country you didn't know existed.
I know. I mean, I played a version of this because obviously this was Survivor Online before it became Expedition Online. I played my game in August. So
Wow,
like,
wow.
I mean, it's been, and that was season 4. So this has been, I mean, almost a year now of people that have played this game. We obviously care so much about it, which is why we mod, which is why we help, and we want to give that opportunity to anybody else who wants to sort of play that game. Do you have any regrets?
Absolutely not. I feel like I spent a lot of great time having fun, connecting with amazing individuals, and also playing for a cause and a charity I believe in. So I don't have any regrets. This was an amazing experience, and I would 100% do it again. This was, yeah, thank you so much to not only the contestants, but all the staff and people like you who helped make this possible because it is an amazing production and you guys are amazing people. And I'm really glad to have been part.
Well, that really means a lot to us. Thank you so much for saying that. That was actually gonna be my final question. Would you play again? And you already answered it. So hopefully we will get to see you again in a future season. What I say to everybody, I'm sure you've already sort of heard about it, but we are a huge community. So, we'll be welcoming you to what we call the fun side soon in just a few short hours, because this is the finale night. You'll get to see everybody who's been modding, and it's this crazy group of people. We all are friends, we all hang out, we all talk. So I'm really looking forward to getting to know you more outside this game.
Likewise, thank you so much for having me.
Of course, thank you so much for doing this. Do you have any final words or any final thing you want to say?
I just want to say to the final 3, give it your all tonight. You guys have got this. You've all played amazing games in your own ways, and be proud of your position because you deserve it.
Good. Well, couldn't have said it better. Thank you so much for joining me today, Ryan. Everyone at home, thank you for tuning in. We're down to the wire. This is it. So let's see who's going to be joining me next time. But in the meantime, everyone enjoy yourself and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Thank you for doing that.